Good afternoon, and welcome back to LCM TV and A Positive Light. I'm your host, Joni Lane, and I'm the owner and operator of A Positive Light Meditation Center in Kelseyville, California. You were listening to music by Sam Houston. That was a Wicca Magic from his Beyond the Crescent Moon album. And if you're interested in learning more about Sam and his music or interested in buying the CD, go to his website at Houston, EUSTON.com and check that out. He's a very talented man, beautiful music. My contact information will be flashing up on the screen throughout our talk today. So if you're interested in contacting me, the phone number, email, and website should be coming up on the screen throughout our talk today. Today I'd like to welcome Joanne Sakata. She's a local mindfulness meditation teacher and life coach and an author. And Joanne is the author of the book Companioning the Sacred Journey, a guide to creating a compassionate container for your spiritual practice. So welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Joni. It's a treat to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. So you wrote this book back in 2013. Would you mind telling us what it's all about and what inspired you to write it?
Oh, well, I was living chop wood, carry water here in the hills of Lake County in a single-room cabin with my dog, my canine companion of 15 years, Shyla. And I recognized that it was time for us to move off the hill because she was getting older. She was about 13 at the time. And I knew she wasn't going to be able to make the walk up to our cabin. So I started looking for a new home and worked on creating this incredible home that I live in now, and made it there in time for her to live another couple months. And so I got my intention of wanting her to live easily and comfortably in her final days. And I got to companion her through her final transition out of her body. And so I was able to be present with that. And she was not only my canine companion, but, my companion in my life, but she was also my companion on my spiritual path. So there was a lot of spiritual growth that happened in our time together. And as she was transitioning out of her body, I was able to be present with her in a way that was not only compassionate, but that also was able to hold space with her from a spiritual perspective. So I was doing a lot of meditation, looking into the Buddhist tradition about the final stages of, life, and caring for her that way. And so I created a compassionate container for her transition, but I was also companioning myself in the aspect that I was losing my best friend and my spiritual companion. Mm-hmm. So as I was reflecting after she transitioned, I write a lot, I journal a lot, and that's part of my process of dealing and healing. And I recognized that I had come to put together a pretty profound set of tools to be able to do that, to be able to consciously meet one of the most difficult periods of my life, losing my best friend and my spiritual companion, and to be fully conscious and present with her in that process. And so I was just kind of transitioning out of my last role with the Lake County Community Co-op and was forging my way into a new role. And I realized that these tools, basic tools, could be very valuable for anyone who was interested in meeting life in an authentic way, not needing to run from it or deny it or anything, but to meet it full on and to be as fully present with the process. So that's kind of how the book came about. And so it talks mainly about the mindfulness part, but in addition, the journaling part, and also setting intention and using affirmation, and then other tools that I had used to create what I'm calling a compassionate container. So.
Well, I love that term, compassionate container. It's very it gives a different terminology to acceptance and opening up to what's really happening. And and oftentimes when we're losing someone or we're watching them transition through from life into their death, there's a closing off and there's denial and there's all kinds of painful things that come along. But to open up and actually hold that, and I love the word container. I think that's just an amazing way to put that. So
Yeah, it's interesting because in the courses, so I designed, what I recognized was that it was very hard to learn these tools just from reading a book. It's a very simple book. And so I designed courses around it. And when I try to describe the container part, people get a little held up because we have this concept, that this is a container. And it is for a stationary or fluid thing. But because we're humans and we're moving through time and space, our container is created by many other things besides just the physical surroundings that we have. Our intention helps set our container. Our attention helps set it. So that the idea of moving and creating this way of being in the world where we are surrounded by compassion for whatever arises is the idea of this container.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the courses you teach tell us more about what's covered in the formats. Can you talk a little bit about what the courses are that you teach?
Yeah, so they have evolved from the beginning. In the beginning, they were just like a 5-week course, and we really just learned the journaling, the affirmations, and the mindfulness. But they've morphed now into an 8-week course, and we spend about 5 of those weeks on the mindfulness part because that is really the core of really creating the container of compassion. And so we spend, the first couple weeks having the journal become our companion for the process through the course. And then we spend about 5 weeks learning the different modes of mindfulness, whether it's a seated practice or, of course, we should probably talk about what mindfulness is first for those at home or on the fly that don't even know what mindfulness is. I don't know.
Let's do that. Let's talk a little bit more about mindfulness then and what that means to you and how you go about teaching that.
Yeah, okay. So mindfulness, the history of mindfulness comes from the Buddhist tradition. At least the mindfulness that we know now, which was started about 2,500 years ago. And it comes from the word sati, which is from the language of the Indian subcontinent, which means awareness. And in the Buddhist tradition, you'll sometimes hear it as insight meditation or vipassana. But today, mindfulness has been taken out of its roots, taken out of its traditional roots, and it's been secularized and formalized. And now it's pretty much considered a quality of human consciousness. And they can study it and observe the benefits of this particular practice. And there's a lot of definitions, but a few that are kind of the agreed upon is it's about paying attention in the present moment to what's happening as it's happening without overlaying a judgment or a concept about what's happening. So it's really about coming into direct experience with your life in this moment. So that's kind of the core of what we mean by mindfulness. And so the courses then give lots of different formal practices or exercises that you can do to learn how to bring mindfulness in your everyday life. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do the 8 weeks is because embedding a practice into your day-to-day life is much more challenging when you're in your busy day-to-day life, to be able to carve out time, create the container for this special time, and then gain a formal practice that you then can bring into your daily practice, your daily life, doing dishes, taking walks, going to work, driving, all of that.
Well, I love the explanation that you gave. And often in my classes, what I teach is the same thing. Being in this moment, being in your body, being in your breath, taking the time to learn how to be in every moment fully. And one of the things I talked about before was we're only given so much life. And we tend to look back at a certain point and think, where did the time go? It's going by really quickly. Um, and often, after giving some thought to that, often I've thought, I think we're not aware of the moments we're spending. We're not living fully in those moments. So they're whisking by us. But when we stop and breathe and be in the moment, be with the children we're with, be with the families we're with, be washing the dishes that we're washing, standing in the line at the grocery store, really being there and fully living those moments, you'll notice that the time doesn't fly away so quickly, that you're actually experiencing your life. Instead of watching your life go by, you're actually experiencing your life. And it gives you a sense of fullness to the days that you spend, because you're actually living those days fully.
I love that explanation of it, to just fully live your life. And that's one of both of our teachers, actually, Jack Cornfield, talks about, there's it's only in this moment that we can experience love. It's only in this moment that we can experience our life, because love in the past is but a memory and love in the future is but a fantasy. So the mindfulness practices are really about cultivating that awareness of being in the body, in this moment, in the direct experience, because this is the only place it happens. Mm-hmm. So I love that, the way you describe living fully in the moment.
Yeah, and I think Jack is a marvelous teacher, along with all the other teachers there at Spirit Rock as well. Really got it through to me that I was wasting a lot of my life, and that I wasn't really living fully in it. And so since I've been practicing mindfulness and being in the moment, being in my body, experiencing my life for every moment that it is, I feel much more fulfilled. I'm more grateful for everything I had. I am happier just generally in being, and my life isn't whizzing by me so quick. And the stress isn't so much either, because I'm looking at life for what it is instead of what I want it to be. And so I'm not adding that stress to myself, which is another thing that we talked about in mindfulness. So do you mind talking about a little bit about stress reduction and mindfulness as well?
I will, because my courses are titled Compassion-Based Mindfulness for Stress Reduction, Personal Clarity, and Emotional Freedom. And just one quick comment about the students that start in the course. I ask them to set aside about an hour a day through the duration of the course for their homework. And, the looks that you get are like, I'm already stressed out. I don't have enough time as it is. And what most people discover is that when they take on a mindfulness practice is that even though they set aside extra time to do that, they end up with extra time in the results of their day. It's pretty amazing how that is, and you just attested to that.
Yeah, I think once you experience when you actually put time aside, you realize that you can do that more often. If you put an hour away to the side every day just for a specific detail that you want to take care of, or a project that you want to work on, you'll realize you get a lot more done because you've put that time away specifically for that. And because you're mindfulness, you've done something well, you've done it efficiently, and now you have more time left over. So, and you can enjoy it that way too.
Yeah, there's that, and then I think you also, as you take on the practice and in the work that we do with the personal clarity and the emotional freedom part, mainly the personal clarity, is that you learn to prioritize. You learn what is important in your world, and some of the other things just kind of fall away as a result of bringing mindfulness to it, because you begin to recognize that you're not getting what it is you're really looking for from all these tasks and things that you're doing. So you create a little more personal space. But as far as the stress, which was the original question that you asked about, they're finding that mindfulness can reduce not only stress, but stress-related illnesses. So the research is finally coming in on mindfulness. They've been working on it for a couple decades now as far as doing the research, but it's showing many positive benefits. And if you understand how stress is working in the body, how our bodies work with stress, the ailments that are stress related, it makes perfect sense that mindfulness will help alleviate those. So gastrointestinal disorders, sleep disorders, anxiety and depression sometimes can be created by stressful situations, and all of those are finding relief through the mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
And I think it's like we were talking earlier, off air before, that if we're not getting caught up in the story that our mind is weaving and we're focusing on being more present in this moment, there's less stress, because in reality, in most of our moments, we're not at risk of being harmed. And really the stress, from an evolutionary perspective, that is the purpose of stress in our bodies, is to get us up and mobile to get away from somebody that's in the process of or threatening to harm us. But in our lifestyle today, we're living at those higher level of stresses without any relief from it. And that's where you end up with the difficulties, because the hormones that are being released and all the chemicals that are happening that are important for a stressful response are hanging around because we're constantly feeling under threat. Mm-hmm. So the mind thought, the thoughts about, the thinking part, the coming into this moment, what's real about this moment?
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's an excellent explanation. I love that. You also mentioned that you lived in Chopwood, Kerry Water here in Lake County, and I want you to talk a bit about that. What does that mean?
Well, I lived in a single-room cabin out in the oak woodlands, out past the oaks there, and you couldn't drive to the cabin. You had to hike to it. So we hiked about a quarter of a mile. Lots of times with either a backpack or a wheelbarrow full of, our goods for the day. I didn't have running water or indoor plumbing. Had a couple solar panels that kept us going. But I'm saying us, and that was my dog Shyla, because we lived up there. And we lived up there for about 10 years, and it was remote. So the nearest neighbor was about a quarter mile away, and then there was just one more other neighbor that was up there pretty much for most of the time that I lived up there. And the rest of the land was, BLM land, and just really, I say isolated, but not really. I consider it more remote than isolated. And it was just a profound opportunity to get connected with the land and with the self, to not have the pressure of needing to do anything because you either have neighbors or community or any of that, to really just have the opportunity to discover who I am in this moment in nature, without any concern about how it's going to be perceived. Mm-hmm. It was profoundly awakening. And I was fortunate enough to have a benefactor who helped, who was also a spiritual, companion as well, just help in that realm of that discovery, of the self-discovery, of who are we really, mm-hmm. So it was really an amazing, amazing period of time.
It sounds like it. With no distractions at all, the outside world really isn't knocking at your door, interrupting you, and you're really forced to sit in that mindfulness with yourself. And what a wonderful way to get to know who you are without the distractions of who you think people want you to be.
Yeah.
Or
and
society thinks you should
right.
be.
So interestingly enough, I still had cell phone. I still had, computer. I had enough battery, to run my computer. And I went back to school and finished my bachelor's degree and my master's from living up in the cabin like that. So it was wonderful.
Wow. So you were so connected.
Yeah. So I still had all the amenities that were, important. But yeah.
Well, what brought you to mindfulness in the first place? What got you there? And why do we get to benefit from your wonderful experience of mindfulness? Who were your teachers? Where did you originally start the mindfulness from?
I think, and it may be this way for a lot of people, I'm not sure, but my spiritual inquiry started out of a struggle and out of pain. So I came from what would now be termed a dysfunctional childhood, where my parents were alcoholic, and there was a lot of anger and some now probably would be termed abuse in growing up. And so there was that beginning inquiry of, why is there pain and suffering? Why am I experiencing this? And probably, I think it was in my late 20s, so I had been doing the New Age, searching. My religion of origin was Catholicism, and it didn't work at some point. It didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And so I went not only to the other religious traditions, but I also went into science. So quantum physics was one avenue that seemed like it possibly had some answers to, life's questions, life's persistent questions. And, so I was on the search, and then I think it was in like 1994, somebody had mentioned doing a Goenka Vipassana retreat. So S.N. Goenka is a teacher from Burma that was one of the teachers that brought Vipassana, which is, again, one of the roots of today's mindfulness, right? This would be the traditional root, the Vipassana practice, and brought those over to the West. And so on a whim, I signed up for a 10-day retreat. At that time, I had not done any of my family of origin work in regards to the addictions and being an adult child of alcoholics or anything like that. So I was in my own addictions and my own dysfunction by that time when I went on that retreat. And there's something that they talk about. There's a joke amongst some retreatants. It's 10 days of 10 hours a day, meditation in silence, and it's a pretty rigorous schedule, and you're not able to write or read or do any supporting practice, movement, anything like that. It's really about sitting on the cushion. And so the joke is that some people just, for the first time when they see the contents of their mind, they run screaming from the hall because, oh my gosh, who takes a look at this, And internally, that's really what happened. It was an incredibly profound experience. I learned so much about the self and about myself, but I came face to face with the addictions and the family of origin abuses that happened, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't have the tools, and I didn't feel at the time, and I don't know if this is true, I just don't know if I didn't have the capacity, but I didn't feel at the time that the container that was created through that retreat would have been able to deal with it. For whatever reason, I didn't feel like I could reach out to learn how to deal with what was coming up because there was a lot of traumatic experiences that were coming up. Mm-hmm. So that was the beginnings of the trek into mindfulness, the Vipassana again being the root of that. And then many years later, right about the same time of getting into recovery, a friend of mine turned me on to Spirit Rock and Jack Kornfield. Mm-hmm. And I went and sat a day long with him and then got his book, Path with Heart. And within a few months, all the struggles that I had had with the traditional formal Vipassana practice were any struggle that I had, completely transformed within 6 months' time between the recovery and that style of mindfulness, insight meditation, or Vipassana, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Just blew my whole world apart in the most positive way. It was just amazing. And so what I've discovered, the difference between the two is that the Spirit Rock teachings, they incorporate the psychological aspects, and they recognize that our culture, America in particular, is embedded in a lot of dysfunction, in a lot of isms, whether it's alcoholism or shoppingism or, TVism or whatever those are. And they address it. They create the space and the place and the wisdom to be able to address that. And I didn't feel that in the Goenka sit. I didn't feel that aspect that was so important for me, having come from a dysfunctional family background.
Well, I think most of us come from some kind of dysfunction. There's very healthy families in this world, but life is difficult, so that we're going to run into some dysfunction. But if you don't have the tools to deal with it, it becomes a really big deal. And I can imagine that if you find yourself in a 10-day retreat, just basically confronted with yourself in a mirror, looking at, oh my gosh, this is all of the stuff that I didn't know I've been stuffing this my entire life. And now how do I deal with it? I don't have the tools. I don't know what to do with it. And yeah, you would want to go running scared from
Yeah.
that because what do you do? I've got no tools. I don't know the first thing about even approaching these problems. So I can imagine that going into Spirit Rock or any place like that where you have a knowledgeable teacher that can sit you down and show you a pathway to go sort through this stuff and deal with it, give you the tools to look at it, work through it. It's a lifesaver. It's an amazing door you can walk through. And I want the audience to know that mindfulness teachers, we're not here for anything other than to help you find a way to be happy. And if we can bring mindfulness to you so that you can learn how to look at the things in your life that are causing you anxiety and stress to the point where it's not healthy, we can give you tools. We can show you tools by showing you how to quiet your mind and listen. And the answers are within you. It's finding that whisper that has the answers. And it's there talking to you, but you can't normally hear it because of all the other chatter going on in your mind. So mindfulness is a really wonderful tool for that. So thank goodness for places like Spirit Rock and for Joanne and mindfulness teachers all over the world.
Yeah, it's a definite, as they say, it's very simple, but it's not always easy to practice mindfulness, but it has been.
Practice.
It's a practice. It's a lifelong, but I wouldn't want to be practicing anything else. It's the key to a lot of freedom in my life. So I'm most grateful for it. And if, as you said, if I can be of service, if I can bring the value that I've received in my life, if I can bring that to others and give them the freedom, that I'm experiencing as a result of it, by all means, to pay it forward is always a gift.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that you teach mindfulness courses, and you do hold some mindfulness courses here in Lake County at no cost. That it seemed like they're introductory courses, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can clarify that for me. And also the courses that you teach in the 8-week courses. Maybe you can explain a little bit more in detail about those and what that consists of. What kind of course
Sure.
is that?
Yeah, so I do I do free workshops around. I'll do, like at Harbin Hot Springs, I'm there once a month teaching a workshop, which is kind of an introduction to the health benefits of mindfulness, and we do some mindfulness practices. And then I'm also available to come into organizations and teach either mindfulness or the whole gamut of all of this, or something that is defined by the organization that they're discovering that they want some help with. So that's the consultant part of what I do. But most of it is based around the 8-week courses, and it's really about creating that container, using the journaling to do an inquiry, using the mindfulness to be able to go inward in a way that is safe and present moment, and then discovering what it is that we want from life, and then using the setting intention part to create that, to begin the trajectory towards that, towards what it is that you're looking for in life. So the bigger courses kind of incorporate all of that. I also do private mindfulness-based coaching, so that if you are, you have something in particular in mind that you're moving towards and you would like a companion for that process that's mindfulness-based, then I do that as well.
Well, this is wonderful, Joanne. I'm so happy to have you here telling us about this. We're going to be taking a break now for a few minutes. So if you could listen to this beautiful music again by Sam Houston, Wicca Magic, from his Beyond the Crescent Moon album. We'll be back in a few minutes. So thank you very much.
Great. Are we?
journey. Yes, I did say that right. Companion to the Sacred Journey. I ask myself that because there's a container for your spiritual practice. And it's a wonderful book. Joanne's a marvelously intelligent, well-read mindfulness teacher, and I'm so happy to have her on the show with us today. So welcome again.
Thank you, Jody.
Let's talk a little bit about two things. First of all, I'd like to talk about where you see the mindfulness movement going in this world, and maybe we could talk a little bit about recovery again and mindfulness.
Yeah, so the mindfulness movement has exploded in America. Whenever I do a talk on mindfulness and I ask people in the audience, how many of you have heard of mindfulness? Now pretty much everybody raises their hands, whereas even just a year ago when I would do that, there'd be a few people that were kind of curious. But there's, in 2005, there were about 100 research papers that had been out on mindfulness, and in 2013, there's now 1,500. So the research is coming in. They've been doing long-term studies, usually with Buddhist practitioners that have had 10,000 hours of practice to discover and study the impacts that it has on the brain. And it's pretty magnificent because they're finding that we can rewire our brains through mindfulness type practices, even the compassion-based practice, the loving kindness, right, will change our set point. So we have a state of being, our basic, if we're kind of neutral and nothing is going on, either super happy or super sad, we have this set point. And, something happy happens and you go up to this ecstatic place and then you come back to this set point, or something really sad happens and you come back up. But what they've noticed is that over time, if you do a compassion practice, that set point increases. So we can actually change the way our brain works and we can create our own happiness. I mean, how empowering is that? Here, how long have we been looking outside ourselves to find our happiness when really we can do a simple practice and change our day-to-day way of seeing the world and being happy in the world? There's now over 720 mindfulness-based programs in organizations throughout the U.S., including hospitals, medical centers, clinics. It's being taught in schools, it's being taught in corporations, it's being taught in the military, it's being taught on Wall Street. A couple of little controversial areas there, the military one and the Wall Street one. And just to take the controversy about the military, do you really want a better soldier? And what they've discovered is that if with mindfulness, what happens is there's a spaciousness that's created around a thought that happens in the mind versus your reaction to it. So you can be a little more responsive versus reactionary from, the animal part of the brain that just is fight, flight, or freeze. So what they're saying is that in the military, it does create a better soldier that's less reactive and so less likely to do unintended harm out in the field. So that's one aspect of it. The Wall Street part, which this is all just kind of as an aside. This is kind of just the interesting stuff about it. So mindfulness increases your attention and your awareness. So the traders on Wall Street that practice mindfulness, the thinking goes, will be able to make that trade microseconds quicker than the competition and therefore increasing their profits. So, which is the importance. Right. So the important thing, at least from the traditional, from what I'm hearing from the folks that are coming from the traditional, mindfulness and insight meditation, is the importance of the compassion component of that. And what we've discovered, or what is being discovered, is that there is just a natural tendency towards compassion when we peel away all the layers of conditioning. One example of that would be, and I did not confirm this, so this was a story that was told by one of my teachers that I went to for mindfulness facilitators last year. And they talked about hiring consultants to come in to Monsanto and teach mindfulness to their executives. And there was one executive, I think for sure, there may have been multiple executives that ended up leaving their position there as a result of coming into awareness of the practices that were happening in the corporate world within the Monsanto. So again, I need to actually research that before I just spread that out there.
It's a very refreshing thought. I would imagine that kind of wakes you up to realize that, what is my purpose? What is my path? Am I being true to myself? Am I working for a corporation that I do or don't believe in? Or maybe do. But
Well,
it
so
might
yeah.
open up those questions for you.
Well, something that happens is as we do uncover and get away from the conditioning that we have, we recognize that there's an inner compassion of not wanting to harm others and not wanting to be in a way that is harmful. So in that way, and again, when you the other thing that they're noticing is that if you companion a mindfulness practice with a compassion practice, the positive benefits that you have, the health benefits that you have, are increased as a result of having a compassion practice. So they're asking, they're really asking that the compassion practice really stay connected with the mindfulness, so that it doesn't just become this tool that you can use for anything, It's good to know. Plus, I mean, but then on the other hand, it's like when you do mindfulness, you get to that compassion part of ourselves anyway, that's just naturally inherent. So one way or the other, the compassion is going to be revealed. So
And
that's
I
the good.
think you hit a really valid point, is that deep down inside we're all good people. And deep down inside we all have our minds know the right and the wrong. We know what is good or bad. We know that we should or shouldn't do things. And I think that peeling away a lot of societal conditioning opens up the truth to us of who we are truly, who our true person is, and how we should live honestly and genuinely as ourselves. And so, yeah, it does kind of open up that door of being mindful of who you are and what the truth is, brings you right down to the nugget of who you are and the truth is. And you live that, and you find that you're happier, you're authentic, you're genuine. So I'm not surprised to hear that people would find that they should maybe go to a different job.
Fine.
They find that they're not suited for the one they're at.
Right livelihood or something.
And
So
so speaking of that, speaking of loving kindness meditation being companioned with or sati meditation, I noticed myself that I've struggled with depression most of my life, as well as many people do. And loving kindness meditation or metta meditation has always kind of lifted me up. And you were talking about that center
set
line,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Set point of
Mhm.
medium and then higher and lower. And my set point has risen over the years since I've been doing loving kindness meditation. It's a tool that I know the science uses for depression as well as medication if someone's on medication. And I never say don't take your medication, because if you are on medication, please continue to take it if your doctor is suggesting that. But meditation might be a tool you want to add to that to help you deal with the depression. So maybe, Joanne, you can tell us a little bit about the science of meditation and depression.
Well, the research is showing that that mindfulness can be as effective as meditation, as medication. Mindfulness can be as effective as medication when it comes to treating depression. And there was a Oxford University study that found that there were reduced relapses into depression by 44% of those folks that had a mindfulness practice. So when we were talking earlier about that depression is really a spiraling down or a digging a hole of thinking that happens, and I know that from my own situational depressions, I understand that pattern and how the mind can continue to dig that. Because mindfulness brings us back into the present moment and not as identified with the thoughts that are rising in the mind, right? So mindfulness gives us the spaciousness to recognize that we are not our thoughts, but we are a thinker that is having thoughts, right? So the contents of the thoughts are something that we can look at and discern, one, whether they're true, and two, whether we need to act upon them or not. And just that spaciousness and freedom that you can gain from recognizing that, just as our ears hear and our eyes see, our mind thinks, right? That's just the nature of the mind, and that we don't need to identify so much with the contents. Then that spiraling, that depressive thinking pattern, spiraling, digging the hole, has a little less grip on us, because we can see the thoughts as thoughts that are rising in the mind. And granted, the thoughts are real, the thoughts that arise. But if you look at the Byron Katie work and you question whether they're true or not, is that thought true, particularly in this moment, right? Is this thought true in this moment? And you use a little bit of discerning to see. There's that spaciousness that happens, and there's the unloosening of the grip, and which then can kind of help to move us out of that spiraling and that depressive state of being.
What would you suggest to one of your students, say they come to you and they're just really in the depression, they're really caught up in it? When you're in your depression, it's very difficult to separate yourself from thoughts. They're all so consuming, and you feel the weight of the heavy dark cloud on you. How would you suggest they begin to approach that? What kind of baby steps can they take to get there?
Well, this is actually some of the work that we do in the courses, in the 8-week courses. We'll look at those in particularly, and I don't want to, just in a couple minutes do a prescription for practice here. I would definitely ask if the person is in counseling to make sure that they're getting all the support that they need. But if I were working with them directly, I would invite them into their body in this moment and ask them, what are the sensations that you're feeling in this moment? So moving away from the thought itself, and what's the direct experience, right? That's what mindfulness does, is bring us in that direct experience. What is that sensation right now? Where do you feel the dark cloud? What does that feel like? Yeah. Okay. So bringing them back into this moment. Right. And the same with anxiety. So 2002 Time magazine article recognized anxiety disorder as the most common mental illness in the U.S., right? So I would ask, and actually there's different ways that you can work with the anxiety, but it is about coming into the direct experience of it, in the body, in this moment, what's happening.
And I know that there's many authors, like Pema Chodron comes to mind, that she suggests leaning into the feeling. If you're overcome with an emotion and it's just all consuming, really leaning into it. Now, what would she mean by that? Can you find a simpler way of saying that? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
I'm not well versed in Pema's work. I've heard that concept of moving into it, and I think what it's speaking to, again, going back to creating that compassionate container where you don't feel like you have to run from what is happening in the moment. And I'm assuming that the leaning into part is that let's look, let's investigate, let's discover, what is this feeling? And the investigation is in the moment. What is the direct experience in the moment of that? And I'm guessing, again, I'm not versed in Pema's work. That's okay.
Absolutely. I think what I was trying to say is exactly what you said. Just really experiencing what's happening in your body, what's happening in your emotions. Can you identify it? Can you name it? Separating yourself from it instead of thinking of it as being you. So these are all tools that we can use for meditation, can be used for stress management, anxiety, depression, even just quieting yourself to where you're physically feeling a little bit better, a little more calm. The physical illnesses that we hold on to, and I say hold on to because I don't think we're always aware that we are holding on to some physical illnesses, are often caused by the stress that it's an illusion in our life that we've created. We think we're in stress, when actually, when you stop and be in this moment, you realize that you have everything you need in this moment. In this moment, you're safe. And in this moment, you're breathing and you're healthy. And even though something may have happened that upsets you or made you sad, in this moment, you have all you need. And if you come back to that, if you come back to this moment, no matter what's going on, whether it's an illusion or real, you can kind of reset yourself and bring yourself back to a place of reality and say, in this moment I'm fine, and then approach life from that point on. I think Joanne's class is just the 8-week course, and I'd really like to talk a little bit more about that. When do they go on? Where are they at?
They are starting next week, actually.
Nice.
I am going to be teaching them in two places. In Lucerne, I'm going to be at Marymount University, and that begins on Tuesday evenings from 6:30 to 8:30, beginning March 17th. And then another series, so concurrently, I'll be in Lakeport on Thursdays, and those begin on March 19th, 6:30 to 8:30 as well.
That's terrific. So, Joanne, why don't you give us your contact information so that we can contact you regarding these courses and find out a little bit more about them?
Yeah, if you want more information, you can go to companioningthesacredjourney.com, which is the website, and that'll get you to the course site, the course page as well. Or you can always call me at 707-350-1719. And if you're looking for one-on-one, you can also find information about that through the site as well. Mm-hmm.
So, Joanne, thank you again for being here with us today. Joanne Sacato, M.A. Here, I'll hold the book up here so you can see it better. And again, if you're interested in finding out more about the classes and about Joanne, feel free to contact me as well. My contact information is on the screen, and you can contact me, phone me, email me, or visit the website and contact me that way too. And I'll be happy to put you in touch with her. So thank you so much, Joanne.
Thank you,
for being
Joni.
here with us today. It was wonderful. You're so well versed in mindfulness, and I had no idea that there was so much to it. And I bet you people that are listening also feel the same way. So this is exciting and a lot of really good things to know about. Thank you again for being here. And next week we will have another guest, Jennifer Stalisser, who is a chiropractor working in health. And she has some really good alternative health ideas. So I hope you join us then, Monday, 3 o'clock. This is LCM TV, A Positive Light, and I'm your host, Joni Lane. Thank you again for coming. We're going to be putting Sam's music on, so you can hear that again as well.